The days after they left blurred into each other in a way that felt unreal, like time had decided to soften its edges just to mess with me. The house stayed quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. Or maybe things you don't want to admit are there. Evan moved through the rooms like a ghost who hadn't realized he was dead yet. We fell into a routine without talking about it. Morning coffee at opposite ends of the kitchen. Dishes rinsed and left to dry without comment. Short nods when our paths crossed in the hallway. It was polite, civil, almost careful. Too careful. I caught myself watching him when he didn't notice. The way he leaned against the counter while scrolling on his phone, bare feet on the cold tiles. The way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, jaw tightening just slightly. Small things, innocent things. I kept telling myself that. At night, the house changed. The floorboards complained more loudly. The walls seemed thinner. Every sound traveled, every shift of weight echoing like a question being asked and not answered. One night, close to midnight, I heard him pacing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting his steps without meaning to. Back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm seeped into my chest until my breathing matched it. Is he anxious? Is he thinking about leaving early? Is he thinking about me? The last thought landed wrong. Too sharp, too fast. I rolled onto my side, heart thudding harder than it should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just the strangeness of being alone together after so many years of noise and family and people filling every corner. But the silence kept leaning in. The next afternoon, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just a sudden click and the hum of the fridge dying mid-breath. The house exhaled, plunged into a dim stillness lit only by the gray afternoon light spilling through the windows. Evan looked up from the couch. Did you mess with the fuse box? I almost laughed. Why would I do that? He shrugged, but his eyes stayed on me a second too long. Just asking. We checked the breaker together, standing shoulder to shoulder in the narrow hallway. When he reached past me to flip a switch, his arm brushed mine. It was nothing, except my body didn't get the memo. I felt it everywhere at once. A jolt, brief and electric, like static before a storm. He froze too. I know he did, because his breath caught. Just for a fraction of a second. We didn't look at each other. Guess it's the grid, he said, stepping back. Yeah. I replied, voice thinner than I wanted. The power came back an hour later, but something else stayed off balance. That evening, we ate dinner at the same table for the first time since everyone left. The clink of cutlery sounded too loud. The space between us felt charged, like it was waiting to snap. So, he said finally, pushing food around his plate. How long do you think they'll actually be gone? 2 weeks, I said. Maybe longer. He nodded, eyes down. Right. The word hung there, heavier than it deserved to be. After dinner, he didn't retreat to his room like usual. He stayed in the living room, stretched out on the couch, flipping through channels without really watching anything. I tried to read, tried to focus on the page. Failed. The lamp cast warm light across the room, catching the sharp lines of his profile. Every time he shifted, the couch creaked softly. Every sound felt intentional, even when it wasn't. You don't have to stay up, he said suddenly. I know. Another pause. I just don't feel like sleeping yet. Neither did I. But saying that felt dangerous. We sat there like that for a long time, sharing the same air, the same unspoken tension. It felt like standing too close to the edge of something and pretending you didn't notice the drop. At some point, the movie ended. Neither of us moved to put another one on. You ever think about how weird this is? Evan asked quietly. My chest tightened. What? Us. This house. Being back here. He glanced at me, then away. Feels like stepping into an old version of ourselves. I swallowed. Some things don't change. His laugh was short, uncertain. Yeah, some do. The silence after that was different. Thicker. Loaded. I wanted to say something that would break it. Something normal. Safe. Instead, I said, do you ever feel like you're pretending not to notice things? He turned to me then. Really looked at me. His expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between curiosity and caution. Like what? Like the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. Like the way my body reacts when you're too close. Like the line we keep circling without admitting it exists. I don't know, I said instead. Just stuff. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Yeah, me too. That night, I dreamed of doors that wouldn't open. The next few days were worse. Better. Both. We started doing things together without planning it. Cooking, cleaning, watching late-night TV. Sitting on the porch while the sun went down, the air cooling around us. It felt domestic, intimate, wrong in a way I couldn't define without crossing lines I refused to name. Every interaction carried weight. Every glance felt loaded with meaning or misinterpretation. I kept wondering if I was imagining it all, if my mind was filling in gaps that weren't really there. But then he'd do something small. Sit too close. Say my name softer than necessary. Let his hand linger on my shoulder when he passed behind me. One evening, I found him in the garage, rummaging through old boxes. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. The air smelled like dust and oil and something faintly electric. Looking for something? I asked. Maybe, he said, or maybe just killing time. I stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind me. The sound echoed. We stood there, surrounded by memories neither of us wanted to unpack. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. You ever wonder, he said slowly, what would have happened if things had been different? My pulse hammered. Different how? He hesitated. The longest hesitation yet. I don't know, he said finally. Forget it. No, I said, too fast. Tell me. He studied my face, searching for something. Permission. Understanding. A warning sign. Before he could speak, a loud thump came from inside the house. Something falling. Something breaking. We both jumped. What was that? He asked. I shook my head. I didn't hear anything else. The house loomed behind us, dark windows staring back like they knew something we didn't. Evan exhaled slowly. We should check. We walked back inside together, steps cautious, nerves stretched thin. The sound had come from upstairs. From the hallway. From between our rooms. My heart pounded as we climbed the stairs, every creak too loud, every shadow too deep. A picture frame lay shattered on the floor, glass scattered like fragments of a moment that had finally cracked under pressure. Neither of us spoke. We just stood there, close enough to feel each other's heat, staring at the mess, knowing it wasn't just an accident. Because something else had shifted. And whatever line we'd been pretending wasn't there. We were standing right on top of it. The glass stayed on the floor longer than it needed to. Neither of us moved to clean it up. We just stood there in the hallway, the broken frame between us like evidence of something neither of us had said out loud yet. My reflection stared back at me from one intact shard, distorted, stretched, unfamiliar. Evan bent down first. Careful, I said, the word slipping out sharper than I meant. I know, but he didn't look careful. His hands shook slightly as he picked up the larger pieces, placing them on the console table. I crouched down too, gathering the smaller shards, our shoulders nearly touching. Too close. I became painfully aware of the way his arm brushed mine each time he reached forward. The warmth of him, the quiet hitch in his breathing. Every nerve in my body felt awake, alert, waiting. This is wrong, my mind whispered. But my body didn't listen. You don't have to help, he said softly. I want to. The words surprised both of us. We froze, eyes meeting at the same time. Something unspoken passed between us, recognition, maybe. Or surrender. I looked away first. When the floor was clear, the silence rushed back in, heavier than before. The hallway felt narrower, the walls pressing in. His room was to my left. Mine to my right. The space between us felt like a test. I didn't mean to drop it, he said. I guess the nail was loose. Or it finally gave up, I replied. He huffed a quiet laugh. Then stopped. You okay? I hesitated. Yeah. Just tired. That's not what I asked. I looked at him then. Really looked. His expression wasn't teasing or casual. It was careful, concerned, and something else I didn't want to name. I don't know, I admitted. You? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back against the wall, folding his arms like he was holding himself together. Sometimes I feel like I'm standing in the middle of something I don't understand, he said. Like if I move the wrong way, everything breaks. My chest tightened. You're not the only one. He met my eyes again, and this time he didn't look away. Then why does it feel like we're pretending nothing's happening? The question landed hard. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again, because saying it out loud makes it real. And keeping quiet doesn't. The hallway light flickered, just once, then steadied. My heart raced like it had taken that as a signal. Evan, I said, his name heavy on my tongue. We shouldn't. I know, he cut in quickly. I know we shouldn't. But he didn't move away. Neither did I. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I could hear my own pulse, loud and insistent. My thoughts spiraled, tripping over guilt and desire in equal measure. He's your stepbrother. You live in the same house. This ends badly, and yet, every part of me leaned toward him. I don't want to mess this up, he said quietly. Whatever this is, that makes two of us. We stood there, close enough now that I could smell his soap. Something clean, familiar. My hand twitched at my side, aching to reach out, to ground myself in something solid. Don't, I told myself. Don't cross that line. A sound broke the moment, thunder, distant but unmistakable. Rain followed seconds later, sudden and heavy against the roof. The house seemed to react to it, groaning softly, settling. Evan glanced toward the window. Storm came out of nowhere. Yeah. Another flash of lightning lit the hallway, freezing us in stark white for a heartbeat. When the light faded, we were still standing there, shadows pressed close. I can't sleep, he said suddenly. The admission felt loaded. Me neither. He swallowed. Can I sit with you for a bit? Every warning bell in my head started ringing. Yes, I said anyway. We ended up in my room, the door left deliberately open. The lamp cast a low, warm glow that softened the edges of everything. The rain drummed steadily outside, rhythmic, intimate. We sat on opposite sides of the bed at first, space between us like a fragile agreement. He picked at a loose thread on the blanket. I stared at my hands. This is still okay, I told myself. This is still safe. Minutes passed. Or seconds. Time felt slippery. I hate this part, he murmured. What part? The pretending. He exhaled slowly. It's exhausting. I nodded. Yeah. The bed dipped as he shifted closer. Not touching. Just closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of his leg near mine. My breath caught. I should have moved away. I didn't. I keep thinking, he said, voice barely above a whisper, that maybe I'm reading everything wrong. That this is just in my head. I turned to him. And if it's not? His eyes searched my face. Then I don't know what to do with that. The honesty in his voice unraveled me. I'm scared, I admitted, of what this says about me. Me too. Silence settled again, thick and heavy. My thoughts raced, every rule I'd ever learned screaming at me to stop. But there was something stronger underneath. A pull I couldn't explain away. Slowly, without looking at him, I reached out and rested my hand on the bed between us. Not touching him, just there. An offering. He stared at it for a long moment. His jaw tightened. His hand hovered, shaking slightly. This is the moment, I realized. The point of no return. Tell me to stop, he said. I should have. I didn't. His fingers brushed mine, light, tentative, like he was testing whether the world would end if he did. My entire body reacted instantly, a surge of heat and electricity that made my vision blur. We both froze. Okay. He breathed. Okay. That single word held everything. Permission. Fear. Desire. Our fingers curled together, not quite holding hands, but close enough that the difference felt meaningless. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could feel it through our joined skin. This isn't happening, my mind insisted. But it was. A louder crack of thunder shook the house, making him flinch. Without thinking, I squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. The door creaked somewhere down the hall. We both snapped our heads up, breath caught, bodies tense. Footsteps. Or just the house settling. The sound didn't come again. But the moment shattered anyway. We pulled apart too quickly, like we'd been burned. Evan stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair, pacing once, twice. I can't, he said, voice strained. I want to, but I can't. Relief and disappointment crashed through me at the same time. I know, I said. I know. Quote. He stopped pacing, turned to me, eyes dark with something unresolved. That doesn't make it go away. No. I whispered. It doesn't. We stood there, the distance between us restored but no less charged. The rain continued outside, relentless. I should go, he said. Yeah. He lingered at the door, hand on the frame. We don't talk about this. Okay. I nodded, even though the idea felt impossible. As he walked away, the hallway swallowed him whole. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart racing, hands still tingling where his had been. The line hadn't been crossed, but it had been touched. And I didn't know which was worse. The house didn't feel the same after that night. Nothing had technically happened, and yet everything had. The air itself seemed altered, like it remembered what we were trying to forget. I woke the next morning with the weight of it still pressed against my chest, my hand tingling as if his fingers had never really let go. I listened for sounds before getting out of bed. Nothing. No footsteps. No doors. No life. For a split second, panic flared. Had he left? Had he packed up quietly in the night, decided distance was the only solution? I found him in the kitchen instead, standing at the sink, staring out the window. The morning light caught the sharp line of his jaw, softened the tension in his shoulders just enough to make him look almost peaceful. Almost. Morning, I said. He flinched. It was subtle, but I saw it. The way his shoulders tightened, the way he took a breath before turning around. Hey, he replied. Just one word. Careful. Neutral. We moved around each other like strangers pretending not to share a secret. The coffee machine gurgled loudly, filling the space where conversation should have been. Our eyes avoided each other, then accidentally collided, then darted away again. I hated how much that hurt. Every small thing felt loaded. When our hands reached for the same mug. When he stood a little too close while grabbing a spoon. When our reflections overlapped briefly in the microwave door. I wanted to say something. I didn't know what, so I said nothing. Days passed like that, quiet, restrained, brittle. We were polite again. Too polite. The kind of politeness that exists to protect something fragile underneath. At night, I lay awake, replaying the moment over and over. The way his voice had sounded when he said my name. The way his hand had trembled before touching mine. The way we'd both pulled back like we were afraid of what we might become if we didn't. Some lines, once seen, can't be unseen. One evening, I came home to find his door closed. That shouldn't have meant anything. He'd closed it plenty of times before. But now it felt deliberate. Like a boundary being reinforced. I stood in the hallway longer than necessary, staring at the door, listening. I could hear movement inside. A chair scraping softly. A sigh. He was there. Just not with me. Later, when we crossed paths in the hallway, he stopped. Can we talk? He asked. My heart jumped. Yeah. But instead of following me into my room, he gestured toward the living room. Neutral ground. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, space between us re-established like a rule we both understood now. I've been thinking, he said. His hands were clasped tightly together. About boundaries. I nodded, even though my throat felt tight. Okay. I don't regret what we felt, he continued carefully. But I regret that it scared us. That wasn't what I'd expected. I don't think it was fear, I said quietly. Not all of it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment the restraint cracked. Something raw flickered across his face, longing, confusion, maybe even grief. That's what scares me, he admitted. The honesty hit harder than any argument could have. We should be careful, he said. Not just for appearances, for ourselves. I swallowed. Are you saying you want space? I'm saying I don't trust myself not to want more. The words settled between us, heavy and undeniable. Neither of us moved. Neither of us smiled. From that night on, things shifted in ways that were almost imperceptible but deeply felt. We spoke less, but when we did, our words carried weight. We avoided being alone together, yet somehow always noticed when the other entered a room. Sometimes, I caught him watching me from across the house, his expression unreadable. Sometimes, I felt the urge to reach for him hit so suddenly it took my breath away. Once, our hands brushed again by accident. This time, neither of us reacted outwardly. But later that night, I noticed his bedroom light stayed on far later than usual. The storm clouds returned days later, heavy and low, the air thick with anticipation. Thunder rolled in the distance as I stood by the window, watching the sky darken. Behind me, I heard his footsteps stop. "I don't know how this ends," he said quietly. I didn't turn around. "Me neither. But I don't think it's over." That was the most dangerous thing he could have said. The thunder cracked loudly, close this time, rattling the windows. I finally faced him. His eyes were steady, serious, searching. We stood there, suspended in a moment that felt like it could tip in either direction. Nothing happened. And yet, the tension stretched tighter than ever. Because whatever we'd awakened between us hadn't disappeared. It was just waiting. After that conversation, the house became a place we navigated instead of lived in. We learned each other's schedules without talking about it. I woke earlier. He stayed out later. When we crossed paths, it was brief, exchanges trimmed down to necessities. A question about groceries, a comment about the weather. Nothing that lingered long enough to slip. But the silence lingered anyway. It followed me from room to room, settled beside me at night, pressed into my thoughts when I tried to focus on anything else. Every interaction felt like the echo of something unfinished. Like we'd paused a sentence mid-word and decided to call it closure. It wasn't. I caught him watching me one morning as I tied my shoes by the door. He looked away too late. The guilt in his expression mirrored my own, and for a moment I wondered if we were both carrying the same quiet ache, pretending it didn't weigh us down. That night, I heard him on the phone in his room. His voice was low, careful. I couldn't make out the words, only the tone, strained, uncertain. When he hung up, the house fell silent again. Later, as I passed his door, I noticed it was open. Just slightly. I stopped without meaning to. The light inside was dim. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was waiting for an answer that hadn't come. He didn't look up, but he knew I was there. "I didn't tell them," he said quietly. I leaned against the doorframe. "Tell them what?" He let out a breath. "You know." I did. "Why not?" I asked. A pause. Then, "Because saying it out loud makes it real." The words circled back to me like a confession we'd both already made. "I don't think this goes away," I said. He finally looked up. Our eyes locked, and the air between us tightened instantly. "Neither do I." The house creaked around us, as if reacting to the shift. The storm outside returned, rain tapping softly against the windows. Familiar. Insistent. "We can't keep doing this," he said. "I know. But I don't know how to stop." That was the truth, laid bare between us. We stood there, suspended in the space between what we wanted and what we were afraid to become. My heart hammered, not with urgency this time, but with something deeper. Something patient. Something dangerous. He stood, took one step toward me, then stopped. "So what happens now?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Instead, the front door slammed downstairs, wind, maybe, or something else entirely. The sound jolted us both, breaking the moment just enough to remind us where we were. Who we were supposed to be. He stepped back. "We should sleep." "Yeah." I agreed, though neither of us moved. As I turned away, I felt it again, that pull, that unresolved tension humming beneath the surface. I knew he felt it too. Because just before I reached my room, he said my name. Not loud, not pleading, just enough to make me stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. But I didn't close my door all the way either. And as I lay awake that night, listening to the rain and the quiet movement of someone just down the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't an ending at all. It was only the pause before something inevitable. The house always sounds different when it's empty. Not silent, never silent, but hollow, like it's holding its breath. The wind slips through the loose window in the hallway. The old clock in the living room ticks too loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. Outside, the sky hangs low and gray, threatening rain but never quite delivering it. It's just me and Evan now. That still feels strange to admit. We're both adults. We've been adults for years. But standing in the kitchen that first morning after everyone left, watching him pour coffee like this was any other day, I felt something unfamiliar twist in my chest. A sense of displacement, like I'd stepped into a version of my life that hadn't been meant to happen yet. Or ever. Evan, my stepbrother, not by blood, but by history, has always existed at the edge of my life. Shared holidays, shared hallways, shared memories that blur together when I tried to separate mine from his. We grew up learning how not to look too closely at each other. That habit never fully went away. The rain finally starts around noon, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm. The house smells like dust and something warm, something familiar. I sit by the window, watching water streak down the glass, feeling restless without knowing why. I tell myself this is just routine. 2 weeks alone in the family house. Nothing more. Evan moves around upstairs. I hear his footsteps, slow and uneven, like he's pacing. When the sound stops, I realize I've been listening too closely. Waiting. For what? I try to distract myself, cleaning, organizing, anything that feels productive, but my thoughts keep circling back to him. To the fact that his room is just down the hall from mine. To the quiet that settles between us whenever we're in the same space. We don't talk much that first day. When we do, it's small things. Practical things. Did you see where they left the spare keys? Storm's supposed to get worse tonight. Dinner later. Each sentence feels rehearsed. Safe. But safety doesn't stop awareness. It doesn't stop me from noticing the way his voice drops when he's tired. Or the way his gaze lingers a fraction too long before he looks away. I catch my reflection in the darkened TV screen that evening. I look calm, normal, someone who isn't quietly unraveling under the weight of unasked questions. Why does being alone with him feel different now? The lights flicker once, briefly, then steady. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaks open. Or closes. I can't tell which. My phone buzzes. A message from a friend asking how things are going. I don't answer. Because the truth feels complicated. Because part of me already senses that whatever this is, this tension, this quiet pull, it didn't start today. And it won't end easily. I hear Evan's footsteps pause outside my door. Just for a moment. Then they move away. I exhale slowly, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. This is fine, I tell myself. But deep down, another question forms, one I'm not ready to face yet. What happens when pretending stops working?